Welcome to my webinar. My name is Mike O'Hagan. This is the second webinar of a three-part series. The first webinar was on the subject of offshoring business trends with case studies, and I talked about some exact case studies of the types of things that people are using offshoring for. We talked about a real estate company that does all of its back office processes in the Philippines. We talked about a company that measures roofs to collect data that they can sell using the likes of Google Maps. They talked about a company that generates its marketing flyers from the Philippines, printing them in Australia. I talked about how New Zealand Post is correcting addresses as they're dropping through a video feed from New Zealand live within 4 seconds in the Philippines. I talked about x-rays, how you can get 2 or 3 people reading the same x-rays and produce a 100% accurate result at a third of the price that you can in the West. I talked about some business-to-business marketing processes that are being run here, lead gen, data mining, finding the potential clients, contacting them, turning them into warm leads and that sort of thing. I talked about a company that does renovation and is using video transfer. They're videoing what they need to have an assessment made on and send it up to engineers in the Philippines who do up a big list of everything that's got to be done so they can do the construction. I talked about how a lot of people are coming up here and doing things like training Filipinos in Australian accountancy standards so that they can then sell those Australianised accountants back into Australia to industries, and how that's going through all the different other industries. Any industry that's got any expertise in that's uniquely Australian, you can come up here and train them and sell them back for Australia. And I talked about a company indeed that does car conversion, does a left to right car conversion, so manufacturing and anything involving mechanics and all that sort of thing can easily be done here as well. And I did finish it by talking about a typical team that you see in the Philippines. That was in the first webinar. In this webinar today, I'm really going to talk about managing Filipinos and the keys to productivity. And around that, of course, the culture issues and different issues we've got. So that's it. So let's hop into the second webinar of the three-part series. Welcome to Managing Filipinos, the keys to productivity. There we go. Sorry about that. There we are. We've got it all sorted out now. Well, just a quick overview again of the Philippines. 7,106 islands grouped together called a country. A population of more than 100 million people. A medium age of 23 years and falling. 2/3 of the 100 million are less than 15 years old. That means they have a continuous feed of workers coming into the market, this now connected market. 97.5% literacy rate. A workforce of 39 million people. It is now the third largest speaking country in the world. The English has been compulsory in the education system for over 100 years. It's an Americanized education system. That's good and it's bad. It means that it's a very, very effective and practical education system. I would argue that a lot of the Filipinos are probably better educated than the average Australian from a practical sense. However, it is Americanized, and it's very, very Americanized, and it's one of our enemies we need to overcome, is the Americanization. 500,000 college grads a year feeding into the system. Currently employed in offshoring is about 1.2 million people, Filipinos, employed in the Philippines working for Western countries. Of which, of course, 75% are working for the USA. And that's good for us. It means 75% start at 10 o'clock at night and finish at 5 o'clock in the morning. And us Australians come along and go, well, why don't you come and work for us? We want you to start at 6 o'clock in the morning and finish at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So that's a good thing for us. The industry at the moment is worth $18 billion a year, although recently I thought that number has been disputed. It's probably understated by about half. It's a very, very big industry. And currently working for Australian businesses is about 150,000 Filipinos, and that's growing by 30 to 40% a year at the moment. There's a massive, great explosion of growth here. To really understand the Philippines, I think we've got to go back and think about their history and how they came about. And I think it's important you understand this, that in 1571, a Portuguese guy by the name of Magellan, under contract to the Spanish king, King Philip, was sent off to find the Spice Islands, and he missed. He wandered a little bit too far north, and instead he found 7,106 islands. For some reason he put a line around them and called them a country. They definitely were not a country at that stage. They were basically Muslim based, and there are a whole lot of different tribes, different people, different languages, and those languages still persist today, and they operated as just a whole lot of different islands. He, at that point, they became a colony of the of Spain, as they did in those days. He rode ashore, pulled his flag up and saluted and said, "You now belong to Spain." Brought some troops in and put their rule in place and converted the entire country to Christianity, to a devout Christian base. 88% of the country today are devout Catholics, and 97 or 96% are in fact Christian. The Spanish, I believe, has given them a governing system which is multi-layered. It's prone to corruption, and we'll talk a little bit later in the webinar about that. And it gave them a massive trade with Mexico and other Spanish dependencies, which has given them a good base here of sort of Spanish through the place. They do drink tequila. They don't drink red wine, so that's more Mexican than it is Spanish. But there's a trend through the place of Spanish in the background. 377 years later, so they were a colony of Spain for a long time. In 1898, the Spanish and the Americans had a war over Cuba, and the Americans won that war and sat down at the peace table. And at the peace table, part of the proceeds of divvying up the peace agreement was that America would purchase the two colonies, Guam and the Philippines, off the Spanish for $20 million. So in 1898, which is about 120 years ago, roughly, the Philippines became a colony of the USA. Now that's very unusual because the Americans were a non-colonizing power. They didn't typically sail around the world and pull flags up and say you belong to us. They were one of the first of the major powers that was non-colonizing, and in fact the Americans almost from day one said, look, we really don't want you as a colony, but what we're going to do is put you on the road to independence. And indeed what they did was they immediately, on the very first American ship that arrived in the Philippines, was full of teachers, and they immediately put their education system into this country, lock, stock and barrel, a complete education system, starts, finishes in June, July, the same as the American system. And they put it in and they made it compulsory, so everybody has to be educated. And they made it compulsory in English. So English became the third language, I suppose, that most Filipinos speak. When they're born, they speak the tongue of their province, where they come from, which is typically the original language from before the Spanish. They very quickly also learn Tagalog, which is in fact the local language of the Manila area, but it's become the de facto national language for the Philippines. And as soon as they hit the education system, although nowadays most parents are introducing this well before that, as soon as they hit the education system, they start speaking English, because in the education system in English, it's all compulsory. It's compulsory in English. At schools, they only speak English and nothing else. So they very quickly learn their third language. And they've been doing that for over 120 years, so it's ingrained into the culture of the place now. In 1946, 48 years later, technically the USA gave them their independence. World War II, of course, interrupted the proceeds, but after World War II, they gave them their independence. However, for the next 40 years, there was a very, very strong American influence, and I think it's pretty well known now that the Americans funded the political campaigns of most of the presidents coming in after that time, right up until 1986. And in 1986, there was an uprising of the people. They threw the president out at that stage, who was Marcos. He was taken off to live the rest of his life in Hawaii. And for the first time in 1986, this country got to really genuinely rule itself. And all that story means one thing: they're a very, very young country. They're only 30 years old, and they're really still learning how to do that, and how to be themselves, how to make decisions and grow. So they're a very young country, still learning how to be a country. They're also a country where they've always had somebody else telling them what to do. And that's important, because If we look at Australia, we're the opposite. We're a country made up of immigrants. Immigrants genuinely are very entrepreneurial. We were isolated in one corner of the world. We had to think for ourselves. If something broke, we had to figure out how to make it. And that means that gives us a resourceful thinking type culture, which is kind of the opposite of the Philippines in a way, because they've always had somebody else telling them what to do, always. And education's a relatively new thing, 120 years. Of course, their leadership has always been under influence of another country up until 30 years ago. So that's why Philippines is where it is today. And the point is that there are massive numbers. You're just not going to fill this place up. Australia's never going to employ everybody in the Philippines. It's just totally impossible. It's, that many more times than what there is in Australia. And so there's massive numbers. They're well educated. They are very, very well educated. They're possibly better educated than most Australians. They're English speaking. They are the third largest English speaking country in the world. And they speak with a kind of an American accent in a way. It's sort of a very neutral international accent. They're Christian. And that means they have the same core values as we do. They're very fundamentally, of all of Asia, this is the only Christian-based society. And Christian means the same core values as we do, and we're very, very aligned culturally as a result. And they're very, very keen and willing to work. They're very, very keen and willing to work. So let's have a little look at what the education system's producing. So here we go. This is the projections for this year, 2016. In medical and natural scientists, we're looking at probably about 183,000 graduates. In business, accounting and related fields, 129,000 graduates, and Australian businesses are certainly hopping into that with accounting and law and all those sort of things being employed here very, very commonly. Social behaviour sciences, education, 65,000. Engineering and architecture, 63,000. IT related and mathematics, 65,000. They've still got a good strong IT base here. Fine arts and humanities, etc., 14,000, which is interesting, sort of the flip away we do. The easy soft subjects are the small ones and the harder subjects are the big ones. They very much value education. It's very much the focus of the family unit to put their oldest and the best through the education system, or put all the kids through the education system, because that indeed secures the future of everybody in the family unit. So that's it, 500,000 graduates a year coming into the system, well trained, well educated, and well keen and willing to work. So I think my point here is that if you can find it in the West, you can find it in the Philippines. I get a lot of people coming up and saying, can I get quantity surveyors? Can I get bookkeepers? Actually, bookkeepers are interesting. You can't get bookkeepers. They don't have bookkeepers. Why? Because they have a massive oversupply of accountants on the market here. Massive, massive oversupply of accountants. And the starting wage for a grad, well, the graduates do 6 months OJT, which is working without pay to start with to get as part of their degree. And then the starting wage after that is equivalent of roughly $84 Australian a week. So, if you've got a massive oversupply of qualified accountants at that sort of rate, they do bookkeeping. They love bookkeeping. They'll do whatever you need them to do. In fact, qualified accountants don't mean to stay in their field. They often go into any field they can find a job after their degree, and of course bookkeeping becomes part of that. So, a lot of people come here, they ask me about can you get this, can you get that? Look, I've got doctors, qualified doctors, believe it or not, who speak Chinese, sitting in call centres doing work into China. I've got just such an array of different people, different skills: engineers, drafting, rivet, accountancy, of course, law, all that sort of stuff. It's all here. It's all well educated. It has a weakness. The weakness is it doesn't know or understand Australia, and if you overcome that, you've really got a major winner here. So it's all here. It's better. It's better skilled, and it's definitely better motivated to serve you. So let's have a look at some real wages. This is a little scale that I do. I like to do a comparison of two areas in two locations when I talk about the Philippines, and I think you could do the same with Australia. In fact, I know you can do the same with Australia. Let's think of Manila being the same as Sydney. And let's think of a thing called the Clark Freeport being the same as Newcastle. In fact, it's about the same distance apart. It's about an hour and a half to 2 hours drive north of Manila. It's therefore consider the provinces. There's a difference in wages, the same as you would in Australia. You know, in Sydney we have high wages, we have high rents, we have the top end of the brain drain. A lot of people from the country universities go to the big smoke Sydney to get a job in the area they're in. They're often disappointed. They often want to go back home. However, once they get there and get their job on higher wages, they discover the cost of living is also higher, so they're not all that much better off. It's all the same thing. It's exactly the same here. So let's when we're talking about wages, let's compare the two. Let's compare Manila, which is the equivalent of a major city, or it is the major city, a city with 20 million people in it. So virtually the whole of Australia inside one city. It's a massive, great city of 20 million. And then Clark Freeport, which is a special economic zone 2 hours north, where it's possibly easier to employ people, and certainly they're probably in some ways better quality from the point of view that they stay with you and they're more loyal to you, they're living at home, and there's a whole lot of really good things about the workers in the Clark Freeport. So the top line is always the one that amuses Australians. So housemaids, or yayas as we call them, drivers as well. Housemaids typically in Manila. Now, when we talk about wages here, we talk about 1,000 pesos per month. And that's how we talk, the language we talk. And we drop the thousands off and just talk the first number. So I'd say to somebody, how much are you paying your housemaid? They'd say 4. And what that means is 4,000 pesos a month. For the sake of doing this, as you can see at the bottom, with an exchange rate of 33.55%, I've done the calculation on that monthly peso salary, and I've converted it to Australian dollars, and I've also annualised it beside this. So yes, that is correct, you're not misreading that. A housemaid working full-time, they are live-in and they do get free food. Live-in free food housemaid in Manila, 4,000 pesos per month, $27 per week, or $1,430 per year. The same person down in the Clark Freeport would be on 3,000 pesos per month, $20 per week, and 1,000 thing. I can hear you saying in the background, how can they live on that? Well, they actually don't, in a way, because they get free food and free board. You won't believe this, but the vast majority of them send all of that money, all of it, they don't keep any for themselves, they send it all home to their family unit in the province, and typically you would probably have 6 to 9 people in the province living on that wage feed going back. It's a very, very uniquely Filipino thing. The family units work as one, they share the wages in the middle and share it back out through the family unit. And that's typically what they do. So that's amazing. So if you thought $20 a week was pretty low, and how could they live on that? Well, the reality is, at least half a dozen people are actually living on that one wage. So we go down, and you can see down the sides there, I've put down Philippines, company, clerical, offshoring, minor, the data, and then I've put down the offshoring industry, the data miner, sales, clerical, supervisor, web developers, and just ops managers, just to try and give you a flavour of how the wages work down. And of interest are the two ones that are yellow. So the top yellow one says Philippine company clerical. If you're a standard ordinary administration worker, you will have 1 or 2 university degrees. If you are working for a large Philippine company in Manila, you would typically be getting 11,000 pesos a month, which is $75 Australian per week. Now these are gross wages, generalised gross wages, $75 per week. If you're the same person down in Clark, it'd be $55 per week. Now, what's of real interest is exactly the same person doing pretty well exactly the same job, or the same level of job, but working in the offshoring industry. And the offshoring industry stands alone here. It's in separate buildings, and it's really, really organised. If it's working in the offshoring industry for one of our businesses, we would typically pay that person $151 a week. So if you're a Filipino and you're working for a large Philippine company in Manila, you get $75 a week. Working in the offshoring industry, you're getting paid $151 a week. And that's right, almost double the pay, if not more than double the pay. The same in Clark Freeport, $55 to $110. So the offshoring industry has created an artificial wage band, and out of that we're creating a very, very distinct middle class in the Philippines. This is a really good vessel for the Philippines to grow its economy and to grow the lifestyle of the people. It really is. So the people working in the offshoring industry, they love us. We're paying really, really excellent money, two to sometimes 3 times the local rate of pay. And to us, of course, $151 a week for a full-time worker is ridiculously low. We understand that. And to them, it's very, very high. So everybody's winning. So, you know, let's start with the sort of, I don't know if it's the bottom of the pile, but certainly it's the least skilled of our workers would be a typical data miner, somebody who's, you know, going online, finding information constantly, finding potential clients, maybe going into Google Maps and looking for addresses with swimming pools in them, or whatever it is. A data miner would typically be on $103 a week in Manila or $68 a week in the Freeport zone. As I said, the clerical's $151 to $110. A supervisor, which is getting up a bit, getting middle of the range supervisor, would be on $206 to $171 in the Freeport zone. Interestingly, they more internationalizing wages is web developers. So pretty standard webbies, PHP, WordPress, all that sort of thing. Certainly specialized webbies are all up here and high, but and if they are very, very good at what they do and very experienced, they will almost get international wages. But the standard ordinary PHP developer or WordPress person here would typically be on about $206 a week, in the Freeport zone $206 a week, and in the Freeport zone $192 a week. You can see that coming up as being slightly different there. And an ops manager, most of us don't need an ops manager. You probably need to have 10 or 15 people, 20 people before you would, and get away a little bit from the some of the support services here. You might need an ops manager. Just to give you an idea though, $343 per week compared to $309 per week. So they're gross wages. They're a little bit showing you how their wages work. I haven't put a 13th month in there for those of you who know about the 13th month. There is the industrial relations legislation in this country is very strict, and they have in December every worker in the Philippines gets an entire month's pay called the 13th month. I haven't added that in there, but it is mentioned down the bottom when I explain the minimum wages that are there in the different areas. So that's typical wages, a typical spread of wages, giving you a little bit of an idea. I mentioned earlier on about accountants. I get quite a lot of accountants come up on tour. So grads there is $103 a week. I said 84 earlier on. I think the conversion rate might have changed on me then. CPA with a few years experience, $171 a week. Analyst there, level, very, very high level, $240 a week. And a super strong CPA, more than 30 years old, with lots of experience, and this would be equivalent to like a partner in PwC or something like that, $619 a week. And there's a massive oversupply of these in the market, and it's probably one of the most common things I see people on tour employing for their businesses in some form or another. So let's talk a little bit about the community and the culture and the way that people think and what's influencing them. In my opinion, the Spanish political structure ensures that this is a country where the rich are silly rich. They're very, very silly rich. 76% of the GDP is accounted for by 40 families, which is amazing. And the poor are vast, and which is the vast majority of people, and officially 25% live on less than $1 a day. I would suggest that 25% is actually quite understated, believe it or not. Are particularly poor. So there's a massive great difference between the small, filthy rich and what is generally very, very poor people. There is an emerging middle class, mainly caused by overseas workers and offshoring industry. It's quite small in the scale of things, but it is there and it is growing. It is happening. It's nowhere near as the emerging middle class in China, but it is happening, and it's a good thing to see in this society. And I think this society is undergoing a massive great change and rationalisation and starting to get its act together and growing as a country. And we're seeing that everywhere. That the new government that's in place is talking about spending a lot more money in infrastructure. They are talking very much about getting rid of corruption. I'm well aware that you're getting a lot of press at the moment about shooting people here. That's not really like that at all. You don't even know any of that's happening, if it is really happening. There's talk about it, but it's just getting everybody to straighten up and stop the drugs and stop the corruption. It's just their move to start kicking in. I think it's the only way they could start to get rid of it, to be honest with you. That's all happening right now. So it is all coming together, but it will be a slow process. It won't happen overnight, that's for sure. So, look, it's a country where the majority of people manage to put a roof over their head, but they barely feed and clothe themselves. Okay, and how they put a roof over their head is very simple. They live in very, very small, very, very simple dwellings with a lot of people in them, all jammed in. They love that. That's their society. That's what they enjoy. They enjoy all sleeping together and all being together as a family. We're a lot more spread out, but that's just the way they are. But they just put lots and lots of people into much smaller houses, which means they can put roofs over their heads. They don't have the housing loans and the buying and selling houses that we have. Once you get a house into a family unit, it kind of stays there forever, generation after generation. And so they the sort of the money goes towards feeding and clothing themselves, and the last dollar plus some more borrowed money typically goes into educating for the next generation. And education's the big thing. The public education system's not good quality. The vast majority of the people here push very hard to try and get their kids into private education, which is very cheap by Australian standards, but it's here. And they think it's a better way to go and get for their family, but that's where they go. And the thing out of that is there's no money left over for health insurance. And in fact, actually, to be honest with you, unless you are really employed in the offshoring industry, you really will not have health insurance. By law or by convention, everybody in the offshoring industry is supplying health insurance to their staff. And it's one of the big locks we use in the thing where I have access to it through the corporate plans. So, but typically people in the community have no health insurance at all, and at least there's some very, very ugly stuff in this country. It really does. So if they get sick, very sick, and the mother of the family, the grandmother of the family gets particularly ill, the result can often be devastation to the entire family resources. And I've seen so many cases here of the elderly getting cancer, of them selling all of their cars, their assets, selling their houses, selling everything, and in fact, basically, at the end of the day, rather sadly, they still lose mum, and they're left as the whole family's destitute as a result. It's tear-jerking stuff. To get a bit tough to it here, but you see it over and over again. It's something that hopefully the government will address in the future when it can get an act together and start collecting the right amount of tax and putting it back into the system properly, which is certainly going to happen. Interestingly, there's no desire here beyond thinking of a better car and a better house. We're very driven in our society by the desire for a better car, better house. It's a generalisation, but it's the theme I'm talking about. That doesn't exist here at all. They're very, very focused on their family. They're all about having a better family and a happier family. They very much, where we focus on better car, better house, they're very focused on a happy, secure family environment. So the concept of disposable income doesn't exist at all. Households live day to day, and that's just the way it is. And as I said before, adding HMO, which is the health insurance benefits extra to our packages here, is a great lock and a great way for us to keep staff. It's also a reason why Upwork and Odesk and Freelancer and that really don't, believe it or not, definitely don't have the best people in them by far, because but if the best people are coming into the structured industry, and the structured industry, they're getting all the proper benefits, including health benefits for their families and everything else. And of course, you don't get that when you're working for the virtual online thing. It's one of the reasons there's a big difference there between the two, which I mentioned in previous webinars. So what we've talked about here is that they're very, very family orientated, and in fact, in Manila, 80% send all their money home to the family pod, where it is shared according to the need, and 20% are independents. They are, for some reason, outside of a family pod. Could be part of a very big family that is already rich, or could be whatever it is. It's about 20% of them are outside of the family pod, so they're independents. And really, what does all that mean? That means that sort of for 80% of them, money is clearly not the main motivator. 20% of them are probably more focused on how much they earn. If you are giving all of your money to a family and they're giving you back an allowance, a pay increase or a bonus really doesn't have that bigger effect on you at all. So you'll find up here, and it's a generalisation, but job titles and chocolate bars with public praise will give you a much better return than cash for a motivator or as a bonus system. So it's a completely different way of thinking to us, and it works very well if you understand how they think and what's driving them in the background. So let's talk about managing Filipinos. There is very much an Australian saving face thing here. What others think of them is really, really important. Filipinos also have a very, very extreme respect of Westerners, all Westerners, it doesn't matter where they come from. When you combine those two together, if you were a Westerner were to put them down and say they're no good in front of their peers, they will simply walk out and never come back. And how can they afford to do that? Well, it's not their income, it's all going into the family pot and it's all being shared anyway. So that, believe it or not, they can throw their job in quite easy. And if you insult them in front of their peers, and that shaving the face thing gets fractured, particularly by a Westerner who they have an extreme respect for, they will simply leave. And it's very important you understand that. They also live in a society that has lots of drama. The families and friends are forever getting into financial and illness troubles, and there's a whole lot of other influences around that. So what am I trying to say here? Look, all of these can only be managed by other Filipinos. They can only be managed by other Filipinos. So my point is that Filipinos are different, however they're also very similar to our culture, and the rule of thumb is very simple. Westerners overseeing the operation, Filipino needs to manage Filipino. Westerners overseeing the operation, Filipino need to manage Filipino. And indeed that Westerner doesn't have to be living in the Philippines, they can be living in Australia. But if you are running a little operation up here where you've got a small team, it doesn't matter how many's in the team really, 1 or 5 or 10 or 20, it doesn't really matter. If you've got that, you must have one person, one Western person in charge. That can be, as I said, in Australia or here, it doesn't make any difference, doesn't matter where they are. But that person has to know the name of every employee, has to know their birthdays, and has to understand some things. And they need in place a couple of really good trusted Filipinos that are actually doing the direct management and coming back and telling you the absolute truth of what's going on and not going on, what you need to react to and what's important and what's not important, because all those things are quite a little bit different than how we are used to. So let's talk a little bit about teaching them. As I said before, I dropped a hint earlier on that they're very well educated. However, they're very Americanized. I can tell you the vast majority of Filipinos have trouble putting a pin in a map of where Australia is. They can tell you, they can cite straight off the 50 states in the USA, and most of them can tell you what's in the Constitution. So they're very, very Americanized with no idea where Australia is. They understand the word, they know what a kangaroo is, of course. Believe it or not, they won't. A lot of them, I've seen this actually done a few times, they don't actually recognise the Sydney Harbour Bridge, but they all know what the Opera House is. So for those of you in Sydney, that's how your branding's working up here. Quite interesting. So I discovered when I came up here and started building my team that written instruction alone, so a whole lot of detailed systems and processes, does not work. What works is one-on-one showing them basic processes with a background of the knowledge of how it all works. So when I hired our very first employee, her name was Rika. She was an amazing employee with amazing productivity. When I hired her, we simply hooked her up on Skype. We hooked her up with the person who was currently doing the job, and that person explained what she does, how she does it, and transferred it all across using the Skype and the screen and email, etc. Transferred it all across, and Rika very quickly caught on, understood it all, and did a great job. And in fact, we went on and we actually gave her the work of 6 Australians before she complained about the work level. And as an aside, she was our first employee. She was one. About 6 weeks after we started, we realised we were on to a winner. There was an amazing productivity and always getting it right. Fantastic worker. We also worked out that we had the danger of one. And the danger of one is you spend all your time and energy getting them up, and then suddenly for some reason they leave you and go off to another job. So that's the danger of one. So about 6 weeks after we started our first one here, we hired 2 more helpers for her, and she trained them. And indeed, when she started training them, she built the processes and systems, and together the team up here built the processes and systems that are running the business back in Australia. So you need to be clear with the objective. You need to be clear with performance expectations. They love KPIs, and they'll be confused if you don't give them KPIs. Opposite of Australia, very, very Americanized. They want the KPIs, they love KPIs. They will come to you if you haven't given them clear KPIs and say, sir, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be achieving. And then you have to sit down and give them KPIs. The opposite of Australia. My employees in Australia obviously hate KPIs, etc., and don't like them. You talk them through fundamental processes, you check the work in a system in a helpful way. So the key to outstanding productivity is to train them. Employ to the core skills, train them to your way of doing things, to your expectations. So that's it, guys. If you think you're going to come up here and get a person who knows your business forwards, backwards, upside down, knows exactly how it operates, and from day one instantaneously can do it, it's not going to happen. However, if you come up here and train that person, you're going to discover that they are very, very fast at learning. They have an amazing ability to learn very, very quickly, a lot quicker than I've ever seen any Australian learn, and they will pick it up quickly and become the most wonderful employees. So, as I said before, interestingly, the industrial relations laws here in the Philippines are very strict, whilst action against you, particularly for unfair dismissal, is very, very common. That's the scary bit. That scares most Australians. The reality is that the payouts here are ridiculously low, and indeed you normally settle before you go to court for, often it's something like a month's salary. It's very typical to pay out. If there's an unfair dismissal, that means you've dismissed them without following the 3 warnings, and it's very, very structured how you do it. If you don't do that, then they will probably go along to the system. They will pick you up and run it through. If you're using a third-party employer like a staff leaser or anything like that, you won't be involved in any of this at all, and that's part of what they do and part of the reason you're using them. However, it's good for that you know this is all happening in the background, right? Another very common trap up here is to pay too much. It's very normal when you first come here to love these people so much, you start paying too much. And I've got to tell you, we've had some very bad instances early in the piece of us up here of clearly paying too much, getting the wrong type of worker with the wrong attitude, all because we're running around with too much money and getting way out of step of what is actually happening in the community. So just stay within your community expectations. You're right. Don't go paying too much. It is a trap. You will get the wrong people and thing. There is an expectation that 12 months of employment you will give a substantial pay increase, and this will continue. This will continue every year. You need to manage this from the very, very start. We're very, very clear up here. We sit them down and say, look, we review the wages once a year. We do it in October. We typically increase the wages by your cost of living, and that's 3 or 4% or whatever it is. Only, and if you want more money comes from your bonus system, or more money comes from getting a promotion into another job in the company. So more money comes from promotional bonuses. We will increase your wage every year by the cost of living. And that's what we do, and we're very open about it. If you're clear about it and adamant about it at the start, they won't come back to you in 12 months' time and hit you, because that's what the rules are. They will obey the rules. And it's obviously written in their agreements as well. On the other side to us, they are very, very politically incorrect up here. It takes a bit of getting used to. They're frank and they're honest, and it can be quite set back when you first said it. Age, sex, health, family situations are all openly discussed in job interviews and amongst everybody. It's completely normal here. They consider it normal to share those things and don't think anything of it, where we would have privacy issues and everything else. That doesn't happen here. You just got to get used to it. It's actually quite enlightening to live in a society that doesn't have the pretense about all these things, that openly shares them, and a spade's a spade. It's really quite a beautiful thing to see. It really is. So the point is that managing a team or an individual is actually very similar to the West. You need to be clear with your expectations. You need to manage to those expectations. And you're as much of the part of the outcome as they are. Look, I have a lot to do with staff leasing and third-party services here. I can share with you that, and a lot of different providers, and a lot of them all friends, and I do see things. In the vast majority of cases, the failures up here are caused by the Australian end, not by the Filipino end. It's the Australian end just not understanding what they're doing, thinking that they are managing them the same as Australia, that if something they go wrong, you can call them up on Skype and abuse them, and all that sort of stuff. It just doesn't work, and really it is much, you're as much a thing. And also the most common thing is to start people here and then have very little to do with them, not talk to them or anything else. Imagine having your workers in your workplace in Australia and don't talk to them for once a week or something. That's crazy. Well, the people are doing that up here as well, so you really got to do them the same. You've got to be as part of it as well. So that's it for this webinar. As I said, it's part 2 of a 3-part series. And I said in the first webinar I showed you 12 different business models that have emerged from offshoring. In this webinar I've discussed some of the cultural differences and the management techniques that help you maximize your productivity. And my next webinar following this one, I'm going to discuss the 7 different ways that you can engage people or services here. And it's really important that so many of us just, I know a lot of us just start with Upwork or Odesk. We get on there and we hire one, and sometimes we get a good one, sometimes we get a bad one, and some of them got good experiences and bad experiences, but we don't realise how limited it is what you're doing that. But once you get up here and start hiring them in a more full-time situation this way, there are a whole lot of different ways that you can engage people or services here. And I'm a big believer that you should understand all 7 different ways before you select the best one that suit you and your business. And it's important you do that. So that's why I'm going to do that in the next webinar. Many fail to maximise this opportunity because they don't know what they don't know, and it's my intention to address that, and that's what this webinar is about. Also, if you're not aware of some of the other activities that I do, although I'm owning, at the moment I've got 6 businesses in 4 different countries, so I'm having a lot of fun. I am technically semi-retired. I do live in Manila, and I saw these failures and I saw the wins. So 4 years ago, I started showing Australian business people what to do and what not to do. I had them come to Manila, and that has evolved into my 3-day intensive business learning tour. Over 3 days, I'm going to take you on an amazing offshoring and entrepreneurial journey. You're going to see all the different ways you can engage people or services with the do's and don'ts. You do visit about 20 different businesses of all different types. Every type of business you go to, it won't matter what your business is, there'll be a message in there that will help you in your business. We have 2 or 3 over the 3-day period. We have 2 or 3 very long, large lectures getting into the minute detail of how to do it all. You're going to be learning from myself, who's a real entrepreneur, and I'm doing it, and some other entrepreneurs that you meet on the course. So this is not a theoretical course run by theory. This is run by a guy who's actually doing it, and I've got the bruises and scratches on me, and I share all that. I share all the things I did wrong, and I share all the things I've done right. And you do visit some of the workplaces I own as well, and amongst those 20 that you visit, where I will share the inside story of what actually is happening and what we're doing. We'll challenge you and we'll help you develop your business model. That's the entrepreneurial side of it. So we're going to show you how to use the Philippines to the max. We're going to show you how to get offshoring to really work inside your business and drive productivity, lower costs, drive productivity, introduce more services and stuff. But at the same time, I'm really going to challenge your business model. I'm going to push your business model, and I in particular will push it very much into an area so that as the business owner, I want to see growth and profit. Number 1, I want to see growth overall. Number 2, and I want to see it in number 4. I want to see it. Number 3, I want to see it done in a way that's non-risky. I'm a big bootstrapper. I believe in funding everything from within. And at the end of the day, number 4, the big one, while you're doing the first 3, you're doing it in such a way that you're doing less work in your business. You want your business to earn a lot of money with you working less. That provides the lifestyle that you need. And I will push your business model into that area. I really, really will. So I think you need to learn before you do it, and you can learn from my mistakes and my successes in doing that, and the mistakes of others and successes of others on my 3-day intensive learning tour, which is called Mike's Manila Tours, and you can see it at mikesmanilatours.com. Normal things on tour. Look, most people on tour convert some or part of their existing back office roles. Yes, they move some jobs from Australia to the Philippines. You won't believe this, but the vast majority don't do that for very long. They do that at the start a little bit, and then suddenly they discover this is a fantastic resource, and there's a whole lot of additional things that you can do for clients and in your business, like marketing, employment, and a whole lot of and more customer contact, a whole lot of things like that. So you start adding in new processes, which means you're building more team up here, and that adds to your profit line as well. So most of you do that. You do a few jobs at the start, and then you start inventing new offers for your business into your business. Several of you will also engage specialised services. Particularly, you may outsource your accounting. We have got accounting services up here doing retail accounting exactly the same as you would in Australia, where you're paying a base rate of $300 an hour in Australia. You can get exactly the same services here for $20 an hour from an accounting service that specialises in Australia. So that some of you will do that, and a few of us will start new businesses or add very much onto your current business as well, but particularly start new businesses. There is an amazing range of great new business opportunities from the Philippines and the offshoring thing. I'm seeing business opportunities everywhere. Look, honestly, why am I not doing them? Because I have already got 6 on the run in 4 countries. That's enough. You know, if I can find some good drivers, I'll get involved with some more. But I have never seen a time when there are as many great business opportunities as there are right now. So the focus now, by the way, in offshoring, the general focus is now on higher quality workers and going away from the robotic processes of what they called outsourcing. So this is offshoring, not outsourcing. Outsourcing was about getting robotic processes out of workers, monkey see, monkey do stuff. Nowadays we're into hiring thinkers. We're hiring proactive people that can drive our businesses properly. So I'll finish with this. If you want to email me, my email address is mike@o'hagan.com.au. If you email me, mike@o'hagan.com.au, it's on the screen at the moment. I'm going to send you a copy of my book, No Strings, The Efficient $100 a Week Worker, which also covers some of these things that I've covered as well. So there's an offer for you. If you want that, no strings at all, just simply email me and put in your email, please send me a book or whatever, and I will send you back a copy of my book and email it back for you. So on that note, I thank you very much, and I look forward to you listening to me at my next webinar, which I believe is next week or the week after, and where I will cover off the 7 different ways that you can offshore. And on that, thank you very much.